Hi everyone and welcome to today's session, Maternity Pay in Sage 50 Payroll. My name is Sarah. It is just me today, but I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A panel. So if you do have any questions as we go, feel free to pop them in there, and I have put some time aside just to try and pick up any questions at the end of the session. So we'll start with an introduction to statutory maternity pay. So we'll run through some of the key legislation, the qualifying conditions, and we'll also talk about reclaiming statutory payments and what makes you eligible for small employers relief. We'll then give you some demos on recording maternity details. So there's two different places you can record the details in Payroll, and just checking where to check the amount that's calculated as well. We'll then look in the pay run. So we'll look at how to adjust employees' payments. So you can either use the makeup basic option or do a manual adjustment. We'll then finish off with any month-end tasks. So this is where you're going to be reclaiming any statutory parental payments. So we'll have a little look at the P32, how to submit your EPS as well. Then lastly, we'll finish off with some troubleshooting. So we'll run through some more of the common queries that we get around SMP and some top tips on how to help avoid them as well. So that's what we've got in store today. Let's take a little look at a bit of an introduction to SMP. So firstly, what does SMP stand for? Well, it's just short for statutory maternity pay. And this is a minimum amount that you need to pay to qualifying employees when they're going to be taking time off work when they've had a baby. Now, SMP is paid at two different rates. So the first 6 weeks of entitlement, the employee will get the higher rate of SMP. And this is going to be 90% of that employee's average weekly earnings. Then for the remainder of the paid maternity leave, so 33 weeks, they then get just at the standard rate. So that's a flat rate of £187.18 per week for the current tax year, or 90% of the average weekly earnings if that is the lower figure. So it's whatever is the lowest. So for lower paid employees, the 90% average earnings would be the rate throughout all of the maternity leave. But for most people, 90% of average will be the higher rate, and then they get the flat rate as a standard in the rest of those 33 weeks. So there is some terms of eligibility for SMP, as is with any parental payment. So employees must be on the payroll in the qualifying week. So the qualifying week is the 15th week before the expected week of childbirth. They do also have to give you the correct notice as well. So that is just at least 15 weeks before the baby is expected. They do need to tell you the date the baby is due and when they want to actually start their maternity leave. So they do have to give you that notice. They're also going to need to give you proof that they're pregnant. So that's most likely going to come in the form of their MAP-B1 form, which is also where you're going to get a lot of the key dates from as well. They do also have to be continuously employed by you for at least 26 weeks up to any day in the qualifying week. And then finally, they do need to earn at least £125 a week in an 8-week relevant period. Now, what I mean when I say relevant period, this is just the 8 weeks prior to the qualifying week, which is also going to be used to calculate the average weekly gross pay, which is going to be used for that higher rate the first 6 weeks as well. So there is a lot of key dates with maternity pay. It can get a little bit confusing, but what we do have is we do have quite a good timeline of the different key dates at play here. So let's take a little look at that. So we'll start off with the due date, also known as the expected week of confinement. You might see that on the MAP-B1 form. And then if we work backwards from there, so if we look 15 weeks before that, that's then going to be the start of the qualifying week. Then going to look 26 weeks prior to that, that's when we want to look for the employee's start date. So they have to be on the payroll at least 26 weeks before the qualifying week to actually qualify for the statutory maternity pay. We then have the 8 weeks prior to the qualifying week. that's going to be used to calculate that average weekly earnings. Then have 11 weeks before the expected date, which is going to be the date the employee can start, the earliest time they can start their actual leave. That's 11 weeks before the due date. Now, it might well be that the employee is off with pregnancy-related sickness, or there might be some special circumstances. And you can see here, so if they are off with pregnancy-related sickness, they would make that transfer to from SSP to SMP, sorry, that's 4 weeks before the due date. So if they are still off sick with pregnancy-related sickness at that time, then that's when you would make that transfer from SSP to SMP. So really handy kind of visual there, just on a lot of the key dates, because there is a lot to bear in mind with it. So definitely handy. Would recommend getting the handout downloaded if you want a copy of that for sure. So just a little bit more about actually reclaiming statutory payments. So this is for any statutory parental payment, not applicable for statutory sick pay that is fully funded by the employer. So just to clarify there. So most employers are going to be able to reclaim 92% of the parental payment. However, if you qualify for small employers relief, you can actually reclaim 108.5%. So that has jumped up quite a bit this year. If you're not 100% sure if you qualify, it is if your total Class 1 and ICs are 45,000 or less in the tax year before the qualifying week. Now, this does need flagged every tax year, but what we'll do is let's get jumped into payroll and look at a bit of a demo on how to check if you are in fact eligible for this. I'm just going to pull my payroll up. Now, first thing you want to do is I am going to check for last tax year. So as you can see, it is if your total Class 1 and ICs are 45k or less in the tax year before the qualifying or matching week. So first thing you'd want to do is change your processing date just back into last tax year. So I'm just going to pop that as the 5th of April 2025. I'm then going to go and run my P32 report just from my quick links section. Now, I do want to look for the entire tax year. So when it comes up with my criteria, I'm going to change that from tax month 1 to 12 as I want to see the year-to-date total for this one. And it's line number 4 that I'm going to be looking at. So you can see there I'm well under the £45,000. So I am actually eligible for small employers relief. So I'm just going to close out of this. I want to change my processing date back into my current year. And I'm just going to go and double check my company settings. So I'm going to go to company in the bottom left, into settings. And I want to make sure this box over on the right hand side is ticked. So I definitely want to do that every tax year. It might be that your eligibility does change. So this tick box will reset itself per tax year. So once it's ticked, it will be ticked for the rest of that particular tax year. As soon as the new tax year comes around, then you would want to check your eligibility again. So I'm happy that that box is ticked. So I'm going to get that extra bit of compensation on my statutory payment. So let's look a little bit more on actually recording maternity details. So there is a couple of things that you'll need before you can record the maternity. So you're going to need the date that the employee wants to start the maternity leave. And you're also going to want the medical evidence as well. So that's going to come in the form of your MAP B1 form. So that's going to have a lot of the dates you need to then enter into payroll to get the maternity recorded. So let's jump back into payroll and look at the couple different ways you can enter that into the employee's record. So there's a couple different ways that you can enter maternity details. So you could do it directly via the employee record. So my employee 4 is going on maternity this month. So I could go into employee, and I could go into employee record. I would want to come along to absence, and then into SMP just down at the bottom there. That will bring you to this page here where you can now take the dates from your MAP-B1 form and pop them in there and generate the maternity pay. You can also look at any 8-week gross calculation and entitlement. So this is one way to do it. You could fill out this page here within the employee record itself. But the other way that you can do it, so I'm not going to fill anything out in here just yet. I'm just going to use a different option to fill my maternity details out. So I'm actually going to go into recording maternity instead. Now you can also record maternity from your payroll links as well. So a couple different places you can do that. Now the good thing about this option, it is a little bit more visual. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tick for medical evidence received. I'm going to pop the expected day of birth off the MAP-B1 form in here. So that's just 6th of November 2025. And then I want to check entitlement. So as you can see, when I check entitlement, got 3 nice green ticks over on the right hand side. So it does mean that they meet all the qualifying conditions. And it unlocks the other dates I need to fill out as well. So the last day of work is going to be the 6th of October. I don't have the actual date of birth or the date they're returning just yet, so I can leave these blank at this point. Now I'm going to go into special circumstances. Now, as you can see, if you do have any specific circumstances surrounding the maternity, this is where you would want to clarify that. So this applies to anyone on trade dispute. If the maternity pay has started early due to sickness, and that is just pregnancy-related sickness, or the maternity has been started by early birth as well. So any kind of specific circumstances, you would want to come in here to flag. Do also have the earnings during the set period. So this is going to tell you exactly what payments is included in the calculation of the average weekly. You do have a little bit about shared parental pay on there. And we do have a webinar later this week around that. So make sure to get signed up for that if you haven't already. And then over on the right, we just have a breakdown of everything on here. So you can see we've got the qualifying conditions. We can see that they've got ticks against that, which is exactly what we want. We have their average earnings, and we also have a breakdown of key dates as well. So really handy kind of bit of information here. You can also print this page off if you just want to keep this for your records, so you know exactly how to track the SMP for the employee. You also have a breakdown of entitlement due as well. So you can see we've got the breakdown of higher rate and standard rate as well. So really handy just if you do want that more detailed breakdown of the maternity. So I'm going to use this to enter my maternity, and I'm going to save it and then close. So that's my maternity entered for employee 4. Now, just a bit of a tip if you are checking the amount of maternity that's going to be processed, make sure you've got your process date changed. With any statutory payments, they will calculate up until your processing date. So if you don't have that set and the figure doesn't look too right, that's going to be a good starting point just to double check your date. So I'm just going to make sure that is correct. I've got my monthly payroll. And I'm just going to go into enter payments. So at the moment, if I go along to the summary tab, I would say that is the best place to check any any statutory parental payments, because it's going to give you that breakdown. You can see it's paying them out £1,854.43. If I did want a bit more of a breakdown from enter payments of that, I could double click into that cell and it's going to allow me to view all of the information. Now, a really good tip for this one is if you go to the entitlement tab, it will actually tell you in this top box here exactly how much it's paying out based on your processing date. So you can see we've got 3.57 weeks being paid out, and that's the total as well. So we'll tell you exactly the breakdown within this tab. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a pause at that point and we'll run through a little bit of a recap. So what we've looked at so far is we have looked at recording maternity. So that's what we've actually used today to record our maternity details based off the information on the MAP B1 form. Now we've also looked at recording maternity through the employee record. So if you don't want to use a recorded maternity option, you can also go into the employee record, into the absence tab, and fill out the same dates from there. So you get a little bit less information, so you don't have that breakdown of key dates and so on, but it does exactly the same thing. So it is just personal preference. We have had a quick look at the entitlement tab, so what is currently due and the breakdown for the year as well. And we've also taken a look at how to get that entitlement through enter payments. So that's really handy, especially if it's the first period of the maternity and they might not be getting a full month. That's going to tell you exactly how many weeks of maternity is paying out. So it might be, as an employer, you top up your employee's SMP. So we can look at sometimes you might need to adjust your employee payments just to account for that statutory maternity pay that is being paid out. So let's get jumped back into payroll. So there's a couple different ways that you could do this. Now, if you are topping up your employee's SMP to the full amount, you could use the Makeup Basic option. What that's going to do is, because we've got a salary entered for this employee, it's going to look at the statutory maternity pay amount and it's going to adjust the salary accordingly so the combination of the two reach the 2,500. Now it's really easy to use the Makeup Basic option. Go into Makeup Basic, it will come up with the prompt. So this will just clarify that it will need to reduce the hours number value of the salary to account for the statutory maternity payment. So if I do want to continue, I'm going to top the wage up to full pay. I can hit on yes. And you can see straight away in the summary page that this payment here has been reduced a lot, but it was still getting the taxable gross pay as being a total of 2,500. Now, it might be that you don't top up your pay, but it might be that they've actually worked some days of the month. This is going to actually be quite specific if the employee goes on maternity pay halfway through the month. So you're looking at maybe the start and the end of the maternity period when you might need to do this. So for example, this employee went off on the 6th for the maternity, and there's 23 working days in my period as I'm going to pay for the calendar month. So another way that you could do this is you can use a calculator to make a manual adjustment based on what they've worked for the month. They've worked 3 days out of the 23 working days. And that will automatically prorata that amount. And again, that is more so if they have worked some of the time and then had some of the time off on maternity. So it's going to be more applicable towards the end of their maternity pay period. Now, another thing that you might want to bear in mind is pensions. So this will be determined by your pension provider, but it might well be that it is a requirement that the employer contribution is going to be based on the pay before the maternity pay. So quick way to do that, especially from within enter payments, is if you go into the employee option, that will open up the employee record. Now I can go along to the pensions tab and I can see that the employer contribution was £59.40. So what I can do is I can go into manage schemes, I can edit, and I can pop my employer contribution to a fixed amount. And that's just gonna, I can leave that running for the remainder of the maternity. You might want to make a little note that I need to change that when they do come back off the maternity payment. And again, this will be totally determined by your pension provider. So if you're not 100% sure if that applies to you, just make sure to double check with them and they will be able to tell you exactly what it is you need to do in that situation. So I'm happy with where my payroll's at now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little look at the pay slip for this employee. And you can see with any parental payments, I'm just going to use a laser layout, they will show just at the bottom of the pay slip like so. So you can see I've got my prorated salary there, and then I've got my parental pay down at the bottom. So that's just a little preview of how you can expect the pay slip to look. And I've got my fixed amount employer pension pulled through as well. So I'm happy with where my payroll's at the moment. Now, just so we can look at a few of the month-end tasks, I'm just going to go ahead and update my records. And submit my full payment submission as well. What we're going to look at next is we'll do a little bit of a recap, and then we can take a look at the month-end tasks you're going to be required to do once you do have someone on a parental payment. So that's my payroll all up to date now. Let's take a little look at a bit of a recap of adjusting the employees' payments. So we've taken a look at using the make up basic option. So this is going to be relevant if you as an employer top the salary up to full amount. It might be that you do that for the first few months. Again, that's totally down to you as an employer. So you can use that make up basic option to get it boosted up to full pay based on however much statutory maternity pay has came through. The second option we look at was making a manual adjustment based on the days or hours worked. So for example, this is going to be at the start or the end of the maternity, where maybe they've had a month where they've worked some hours and some maternity. So they've got a little bit of a split going on. We've then looked at pension adjustments. So again, employer pension contributions during SMP is usually based on the employee's normal pay. So recommendation for this one is to enter a fixed amount to override the percentage calculation. Again, if you're not 100% sure if this applies to your pension scheme, best thing to do is reach out to the pension provider. It will be them that determines whether this is applicable or not. Now, we have updated our records, we've submitted our FPS. Let's take a little look at some month-end tasks that we want to consider. So let's jump back into payroll. You can see my last updated date and my last FPS date are matching, which is exactly what I want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run my P32. I'll run that for tax month 7. So you can see here, we have SMP recovered and we have our NIC compensation as well. So that's going to be because we are eligible for small employers relief. What I would say on the small employers relief is I do strongly recommend checking if you're eligible before you go ahead and process any statutory parental payments, because if it isn't ticked at the point of processing, it won't actually account for the extra. So it doesn't actually run retrospectively. It would then be something you would want to go back and correct. You can see at the bottom here, we have the 8.5% applied as well. So we can see the SMP on our P32 and we can see our small employers relief on there. Next thing we want to do is we're going to need to submit an EPS. So that's an employer payment summary. Again, there is a couple of places that you can do this. So you can do this from your quick links, or you can do it through your e-submissions in here as well. Now, you do want to submit the EPS by the 19th of the following calendar month. So for October, I would have till the 19th of November to submit it. Now, something else to note with your EPS is it is a year-to-date running total. So this will increase, you know, month on month, as it's always going to be a year-to-date amount that's submitted in there. So again, because of that, if you do miss one, don't worry too much, because anything that has been missed will always get picked up in the next one. So let's go ahead and get the EPS submitted. I'm going to go into Employer Payment Summary. I want to select this first option here because we are recovering statutory payments. I'm just going to go through. I can see it's up to tax month 7. I've had a couple people on maternity pay in my payroll this tax year. So I can see those are the correct year-to-date amounts. So I'm just going to go next and finish. This won't come up for you. This is just because we're in a demo environment today. And I can continue through and get that all submitted. And that's going to let HMRC know exactly how much it is I need to reclaim and reduce my bill by. Brilliant. So that's all been successful. So in terms of reclaiming statutory payments, we've looked at the P32, where to see the amount of SMP that you're recovering and the small employers relief, if it's applicable for you. We've then looked at the employer payment summary. So if we are recovering statutory payments, it'll be that first option that we want to be selecting. Now, you do have until the 19th of the following calendar month to submit your EPS. But again, as it's a year-to-date submission, if you do miss one, anything missed will be picked up the next time round. So that's it on the demo for statutory maternity pay. I did want to wrap things up by looking at a bit of troubleshooting. So a couple of common scenarios with this one is the first one is where an employee's had SMP before, so it's their second child. Now, if you use the quick employee option, so if you go in via record an SMP, you will see that message over on the left-hand side. Now, this will reset the weeks paid from the year-to-date values, or you could always do it manually if you prefer to do that. So if you do use the quick SMP option, you do want to be a little bit careful about going in there. So it might be that you go in there just to check the details and you say yes, and it'll clear out the information. So if you're not too sure on what to do when you see that message, my recommendation was just click no to begin with. That way it means you're not actually clearing down any information until you go away and review exactly what it is you need to do. So let's take a little look at just a quick example of that. Just going to bring payroll back up. So my employee 1 has maternity details entered for a previous child. So if I go back to payroll tasks, and if I go into recording maternity, you'll see that this message pops up. So it says, you've already paid SMP to this employee. do you want to record SMP details for a second child? Now, if I just wanted to come in here and view the information, I would say no. Or if I was in fact recording it for a second child, I can say yes, and that will clear down the year to dates automatically. I'm just going to say no for now. So you can see they've already returned to work. It might be that I prefer to clear the year to dates down manually. So if you do prefer to do that rather than clear down any information, I could just close out of here. And I can also go to employee record, along the employment tab and into YTD values. So if you prefer, you could come into here along to statutory payments and you could reset this week's paid. Now, if it is within the same tax year that they're going off, you don't want to touch anything in these two columns because you do still want that to be included in your EPS. However, you do want to clear down the weeks paid, as that will be what needs to be reset for the new maternity that you're going to be entering. So this is just quite a common query if they have had a child before. So if you enter new maternity details but no amount is being paid out, just have a think, is this their second child? If it is, that is an ideal place to check. So just a bit of a common call there. Now, a couple of more things to consider when it comes to maternity pay. So if there's no SMP calculating, again, this links back to the example that we have just looked at. So solution for this one, you can either use Quick SMP to clear the previous information or go into the record manually to remove the year-to-date value. So it would just be the weeks paid that you would be removing. Second potential cause could be, are the average earnings too low? Solution for this, jump into Quick SMP. As we've seen the 3 ticks down the right hand side, if the average earnings are too low, it will tell you within this window if they don't meet the qualifying conditions. Last one we'll look at is manual statutory pay selected. So if you've put all of the details in and there's no amount actually calculating, what you could do is you need to check if manual SMP is selected. So just to give you a little bit of a view of where that is. So if you look at employee 7, go along to absence and down into SMP. So you can see that this employee should be getting paid SMP. But as I have my manual statutory maternity pay calculation box selected, if I go into enter payments, just need to pop that processing date forward into November. I go into enter payments, because that manual SMP box is selected, it won't actually generate a figure. It will wait for it to be manually typed in like so. So solution for that one, if you do want it calculating automatically and there isn't any other reason, you need it manual, you would just want to come in here, go along to absence, into SMP and untick that manual box. Nice, easy solution for that one. Now, a couple more common calls. So maybe the SMP amount is more or even less than you expected. I did touch on this before, but has the correct processing date been entered? So solution for this, again, statutory payments are calculated up to the processing date. So first and last payments, naturally, they might be a little bit more or less than expected. On the other hand, it might be if you've closed the program and went back in and just not changed the date. Just double check that if the figure is there, but it doesn't quite look right. So that's a really good starting point. Or if the amount is less than you expect, it could well be that they're a low earner and then 90% of the average weekly is below the standard rate of SMP. So do remember, if the 90% of the average is lower than the £187.18, that will be the amount that they'll receive. So definitely a few things to bear in mind and really handy things to check if you do have a problem when entering your statutory maternity pay. So that's it for the demos today. I do just want to finish up by running through some further support, and of course I will then have some time to look at any questions that might have came through. So we do have a couple more statutory payment webinars coming up later this week. We then have a few at the end of the month just around attachments, minimum wage check and month end as well. So if you haven't already got signed up for those, make sure to get registered. Would love to see you there. Did want to shout out the Help Centre as well. It is a really great resource. You can access it really easily by clicking on the help icon just next to the reports in your Sage 50 payroll. You can get your technical support guides on there. You can get our recorded on-demand webinars and information on how to get in touch with the team if you need to. Sage University as well is a really great resource. So you can do anything on here from bite-sized learning to full certifications, and you can do it all at your own pace. It is totally free to actually set up your account. So get signed up and have an explore when you do have the time. So as promised, for the next few minutes or so, I will stick around just to answer any questions that might have came through. So if you haven't already, make sure to get them popped into the chat and I will try and answer as many of you as I can. But I will pop on mute for now. And if you are leaving us at this point, you might get a little survey. If you do have 2 seconds to fill that out, that would really be appreciated. But I'll just pop myself on mute for now, pick up any questions that have came through, and I will see you all shortly to wrap the session up. Hi again, everyone. Hope you've all enjoyed today's session. I've not had any more questions come through, so I will close the session down in the next minute or so. As you exit, you will see a short survey. If you can take a moment to fill that out, your feedback is really valuable to us. I'd love to hear what you thought worked well, what could be improved, so we can keep making these sessions even better for you. You will also receive a follow-up email later today. We'll have a link to the webinar recording on there and information on how to register for future sessions. But thanks again for joining me today. Hopefully I will see you all again soon, but it is goodbye for now.